kindness matters. When you think about our daily lives and the decisions we have to make, if we can be just a little bit more kind to one another, we'll make this world a better place.
Welcome to the Leaders in Technology. I am your host, David Mancilla. Today we have with us a person that has pushed the envelope in the technology field and certainly making this world a better place. Mahi Silva. Brother, welcome to the show.
Thank you, David. It's a pleasure to be here.
Mahi, for the audience, can you tell me your full name, where do you live, and what is it that you do for a living?
So, David, I live, so my full name is Mahi Silva. I live in Los Altos Hills, California. And today I am the CEO of Triller.
Okay, can you tell me what Triller is and what is it about?
So, David, as I mentioned, the company is in the process of going public and we're in a quiet period. So I really cannot say anything about the company itself right now to be compliant with the SEC requirements, and everything has to be distributed and consumed like any potential shareholder. So I apologize, but that's just one thing I can't speak about today.
So imagine that I forgot about that already. Sorry about that. Let's just say for the audience, you will soon find out what the company is. You can Google it yourself if you like, because obviously you guys have a website. And this is one of the reasons why I really wanted to do your interview, because taking a company public is not easy. And in fact, if they trusted you to lead this endeavor, it means that you have a lot of background in business, running businesses and making them successful. So before you started with this business, where were you at?
So the last job I had was I ran a company called Opera MediaWorks. And Opera MediaWorks was a mobile advertising platform that helped advertisers, brands reach consumers primarily on mobile devices and just mobile devices, really focus on things like the iPhone and iPads, tablets, all over the world.
So basically it's digital advertising through mobile devices.
Yes.
That's interesting. How was that experience, and how because the world is dominated by Google AdWords and Google AdWords and Meta advertisers, that's where you get most of the eyeballs. How did this application make it different?
Well, first and foremost, we weren't captive to any one site or app. We powered advertising for lots and lots of mobile applications, and everything from the Wall Street Journal to streaming services like Pandora, and games, everything from Angry Birds to a lot of very popular competitive games. So our value proposition is that we could bring a broader audience than just a single platform or a single application. We could do that on iOS and Android, and bring hundreds of millions of eyeballs to advertisers. And we did that in a way that really innovated around video advertising, which was new to mobile devices, but really helping brands tell their story, and to do that the best way possible within an in-app or browser experience on these mobile devices.
That's beautiful. So the technology will actually insert videos within the user experience, and they will actually the video will get displayed.
That's right. and we made it interactive video. So you weren't just watching it, you could interact with it. We had 3D ad units so that, if you were on a phone and you used the gyroscope, you could actually, get a more 3D experience with that ad. So let's say you were browsing for a car, and instead of just seeing a flat 2D image of that car, you could have like a fly-through or a walkthrough of that in an AR, VR experience.
So neat. So you guys were a technology company that happened to do advertising then.
That's right. That's right. And I ended up at Opera because I sold the company I founded, a company called Ad Marvel, to Opera, which became Opera Media Works. And that really helped us get to a much broader audience. We could certainly provide advertising in the Opera browser itself, but then we could leverage that for advertisers all over the world.
Incredible. So Ad Marvel was your idea then. You founded the company and you got it going.
Yeah, and I have to say I co-founded it with a couple other people. But yeah, it was definitely a collective effort.
Do you think being in the Silicon Valley area, it's advantageous to start up companies like this in the tech world?
Absolutely. I think the magic of Silicon Valley is that you get a lot of people that are, in and around the tech world, but also what I haven't seen in other places, whether it's New York or Miami or Berlin or Bangalore in India, is a real sense of collaboration, that people understand that there are a lot of good ideas, and you can build off these ideas if you're open and willing to share some of those thoughts. And companies could compete, for customers, but still collaborate on setting standards and moving the entire industry forward.
That is so true. I am blessed that I live in we call it the Canadian Silicon Valley. It's a technology triangle, so it's Toronto, Kitchener, Waterloo. Waterloo has University of Waterloo that brings a lot of new tech companies to, a lot of students become startup entrepreneurs. And the reason of the success is the community hub that we have. So we have something called Community Tech, and we have over 2,000 companies collaborating, and these guys, they make a great job training people, giving legal advice, providing financial advice, and also seed capital. So the ecosystem is here, but it took many, many years to build it. And in fact, the companies that actually become something, they move to Silicon Valley. But to give you an idea, the latest unicorn that we produce is called Applied Board, and it was, this kid came to college from Pakistan here in Conestoga College, and he got everything he needed to build this company, and it became $1 billion valuation. They're still around. I don't know why, but they're still around. But because usually people, when they get to $100 million, they moved to Silicon Valley for sure, right?
That's a great story.
Mahi, in order to not only co-found a company, raise it to a level that you could sell it to a bigger venue, and then make it something impactful, it takes a lot of skills and it takes a lot of effort. And that's why I'm interviewing you. But this podcast is about decomposing and reverse engineering your life so that we can see the golden nuggets inside on how you made it to where you are. So let's look back in time. I want you to think about your last day of high school. What were you doing and what was in your mind? What did you want to do?
So my last day in high school, I grew up in Wichita, Kansas. And I wanted to be an engineer. So I set my sights on getting an electrical engineering degree and, working on computers. So, in my journey, I did go to university. I started in an electrical engineering program, but then I really decided that software was my calling. so I kind of transitioned my major to computer science, and that was really the beginning of a lifelong journey of learning how to program computers and build applications and build systems that lots of people could use.
That is incredible. Now, how long ago are we talking about?
So I graduated from high school in 1982, a long time ago. But I went to the University of Kansas, and I worked for a little bit in the Midwest, but the job that I really feel like I got my core training was I got a job at Apple in 1989, working on an advanced system software group that was building the next Mac OS. And I got a chance to work with some remarkable people. When you look back now, there's people that have really shaped the future of computing. And we worked on something very audacious at the time to build an object-oriented operating system, and one that really supported, at the time, everything was 2D in the world, but introduced 3D graphics, and really wanted to create something that was much more immersive than the first generation of computing.
It must have been fantastic to get hired by Apple in 1989 when Apple was just starting, right? I mean, if just to think about this. So I got my first computer science degree in 1990. And I remember everything was text-based. But before then, in high school, the way I got into computer science is because of my dad. He bought an Apple IIe, a text-based Apple, and he locked it in a room, and he says, "You're not allowed to touch that computer, it's too expensive." But he made sure that I saw where he left the key. So when he was away, I was sneaking and tried to play with the computer, whatever I could. So I got fascinated, and I tried to make sure I wasn't caught, and that just developed my passion for computer science. Later on, before he passed away, 2017, he told me, "So I guess the trick worked." "What trick, Dad?" "Well, I hit the key on purpose so that you will fall in love with computer science. Look at your life now, a serial entrepreneur in technology." I'm like, "Oh, Dad, that's incredible." But that was his brilliance, right? That's how he operated. But back then, I remember, people take everything for granted. My daughter was born in 1998, and she was already born with a mouse in her hand, right? You and I, we saw the evolution of this, and it's beautiful because, why you wanted to do electrical engineering? Because electronics engineering wasn't a thing. They hadn't invented that course yet.
That's
right?
True. That's true. I have my oldest son, is a data scientist and programs. And, I often joke about the fact that when I learned to program, which was in Fortran back in the 1970s, I had to use a punch card machine to write my code, right? So I would sit at a machine, create these punch cards. I would take the stack of cards, take it to the administrator. They'd read it into a mainframe computer and run my program. And it literally took hours to build something very simple because of a simple syntax error meant that you had to start from scratch, and you had to find the card and replace the card, and it was very cumbersome. And you look at today, when you think of generative AI assisted code assembly, you couldn't even fathom how quickly we've moved. And it hasn't been that long, it's about 50 years. But the ease to go from a concept that you have into a program that runs on your computer or on your phone can happen in an instant today.
Yeah.
And that's real evolution, real revolution, really.
Well, just look at IPTV, right? I never thought that we will actually be able to sunset all the regular cable and satellite television. But I caught my cable in 2011 because IPTV was fast enough that I could get all my content online. Right? We've been breaking frontiers in technology faster than we can breathe. Isn't that incredible?
It is incredible. And the diversity, just like what you said, once you cut the cord, your ability to find interesting content, it really changes. You don't, when I was a kid, you would sit at the television, you'd flip through channels. And today maybe you flip through, you swipe or swipe up videos on a phone. But today, viewing, particularly on a big screen TV, is purposeful because the underlying systems have done such a good job of understanding what you like to watch, how to recommend things that are, well suited. And when companies like Netflix got started, that recommendation engine wasn't very good. But today, I find a lot of stuff that I watch comes from the recommendation engine.
Yeah. No, it's incredible that, actually my evolution on that was finally a year ago, I said, I'm even going to delete all the apps that I used to watch, and I'm just going to keep YouTube Premium because I know how to handle the algorithm to give me the content that I want, to your point. And that's more than enough. No commercials, and I'm consuming what I want to consume, Incredible.
Yeah, it's pretty amazing.
So what was life like at Apple in 1989? How big was the company? Was Steve Jobs still around, or was he on his way out?
Well, what was interesting is when I showed up, Steve Jobs had just left. Actually, he was pushed out. He didn't leave, the board pushed him out. And I think in many ways, Apple lost its way when Steve wasn't there. There was still a lot of good products developed, but it didn't have that focus. It didn't have that visionary leader that could bring thousands of engineers together and have him follow that vision. But when I left Apple, I was there for about 8 years. When I left Apple in 1996, he had just come back. And you could tell that, the environment inside Apple was electric. It's like, oh, what's Steve going to do? How are we going to change? And, as we all know, he had a tremendous impact and took the company to completely new levels.
I remember that time, so I graduated from computer science in my hometown from Guatemala. Then in 1991, I moved to Canada. And in 2 more years, I got into another computer science program here. And I graduated in 1995. And I remember how we were watching Apple almost going bankrupt. I'm like, I can't believe it. Like the first job that I had as a software engineer was working for the Board of Education, and it was all Apple-based. Every single classroom had a Mac. Even administrators had Macs. And I'm like, how are we going to transition to a Windows-based machine? This is crazy, right? And then sure enough, Bill Gates comes in and, it rescues Apple because of the monopoly thing, right?
Yeah, it's really an amazing story because, when we were, particularly for the OS people, Microsoft was the enemy. We used to kind of make fun of MS-DOS because it was so basic. But when Windows came out, we had to kind of take a look and say, okay, that's not bad. Even though the first Windows wasn't as good as the Mac, they really leaned in and built, a much more popular OS. But, and today I think they coexist. There are, the Mac family or the Apple family of products, from phones to desktops to laptops, sell a lot of Microsoft Office and other products. So yeah, it's interesting to see how they've gone from fierce competitors to friends to really collaborators, because their common enemy is now more Google and Meta and other companies.
Yeah, it's a beautiful story for sure of co-creation and collaboration, right? And I think Microsoft still owns a big bunch of shares from Apple, so both benefit from each other, right? It's incredible to see how, and also the market deserves to have two big giants. Like if you have only one company doing everything, then you lose the variety and you lose the competition, and then things get stuck, right? You need that competition.
I think that's true, and you can see in the evolution where a company like Alphabet, still has very, very large market share in search, but search is changing so quickly. What you can now do with AI-powered search and chat-based search without a lot of sponsored ads, is really driving people to a different user experience. So I think competition is key to innovation, and I feel like we're right in the middle of that wave of innovation.
Is the change, right? Like the one thing that I was blessed with is the passion for change. If I hadn't that, you and I wouldn't be in this field. Like, for me, university was just a way to learn how to do my own learning and how to research, because it just changes so fast now with the world of AI. Like, my main company is we do custom software solutions for other businesses, and now half of the stuff that we write is based on AI, and we started investing on that 5 years ago, because I could see it coming. So it's constant changing, right?
For sure, yeah.
What do you do after Apple? Where do you go?
So after Apple, I got an invitation to come join this little startup as VP of engineering for VeriSign. And VeriSign at the time was really helping move the security for the internet. VeriSign with RSA built the technology that turns the lock on in the browser. That was another interesting journey. I started there in early 1996. We took the company public in 1998, and here we are. 26 years later, the company is doing really well.
Still going strong for sure. So you guys survived the .com crash. Remember that era?
We did.
That was crazy.
That was crazy. Our market cap dropped from $44 billion to slightly less than $2 billion in one day.
In one day? One day.
Well, it was the big crash, right?
Yeah.
But then we rebuilt it, right? We really focused on what was important. And in the 10 years I was there, we did 52 acquisitions.
Wow.
So integrating lots of different companies, really reinventing what that company was. And I think that's the test of a true survivor, right? When things change, you have to move with the market, and you got to read the market and be nimble. And I think VeriSign's a great example of that.
Pivot, right? It's always like that. I've been in business for 18 years. And if it wasn't because I had the wisdom of pivoting when things were going sideways, I wouldn't be here. Most businesses go out of business within 2 years because they don't have that flexibility, that momentum, It's congratulations. That's great. How was your exit from VeriSign?
It was good. I'd made a commitment to our CEO that I'd be there for 10 years. back when I joined. And I lasted a little more than 10 years, but I really kind of I was bitten by the entrepreneur bug again. And so I went off and built another company that was in kind of the mobile social space starting in 2006. It was right before the iPhone shipped. And, places like MySpace were starting to see competition from Facebook. So we thought it'd be a good time to get into that area.
How did that go?
It was fun, when Facebook opened up their APIs to developers to build apps on top of Facebook. And just kind of as a fun experiment, we built an app called Flirtable. And it was a very casual, funny, flirting application. And in about 6 months, we had 50 million users on that app.
Incredible.
On Facebook. And, we were starting to monetize some of that, because primarily it was on desktop, but mobile was starting to become more interesting. And it was really when we discovered how difficult it was to put ads on a phone, that was really the inspiration for the next startup, which I mentioned was Ad Marvel, because of all the friction that was in getting, ads that were made for the desktop to show up on a phone. It just didn't work, right? Like a big banner ad on a mobile device with a vertical orientation just didn't make sense. So getting through all of that, and even today we talk about the changes in the ad market and tracking and things like that. But going back to Steve Jobs, when the iPhone shipped, Steve Jobs decided that the iPhone would not support third-party cookies. This is back in 2007.
Which meant no tracking, no app tracking.
Well, it meant tracking was more difficult, right? Because it had to only be first-party cookies that could track. And that's why a lot of the ad tech that was built for desktop didn't work on mobile phones. That was also an opportunity, because for people that could figure that out, that meant you could be a real enabler of making those ads work on mobile phones.
It's incredible, Mahi. You and I have experienced the rise and fall and rise of technology. Now that you're talking about the new iPhone when it came out, I live in Waterloo, where the BlackBerry was developed. I had one of the very first BlackBerries in the year 2000. I had push notifications when people were still playing with their Palm Pilots. And you have to be old enough like us to know what we're talking about,
Yes.
And Absolutely. It was the de facto, right? Like I remember for 9/11, the only network that survived 9/11 was the BlackBerry. So it became the security phone for the government, US government. And how, I don't know, like we made many billionaires here in Waterloo. This is why we have this tech startup here. But at the same time, I saw the demise because they just blinded their eyes to the new technology that was coming up with Apple, and they just allow themselves to sit in their technology and never innovate anymore.
Yeah, and as innovative as BlackBerry was, and like everyone that was a professional, in the early 2000s, they needed a BlackBerry because it was email, like you said, push notifications, some beginnings of the browsers on phones. But because they had such good market share, I think they were complacent. Yeah. And by the time they went from the keyboard-driven phone to one that was full screen, Apple was moving so much faster at catching up to the BlackBerry that it was unfortunate that they couldn't innovate out of that dilemma.
And they're still around, still a publicly traded company, but they're focused more on the back end now. But I remember when WhatsApp got acquired by Facebook, How many billions of dollars was that?
I think, it ended up at like $19 billion.
Okay, that's a texting application. BlackBerry had something called the BlackBerry Messenger, and that thing was end-to-end encrypted. It was powerful. Nobody could actually sniff it. That's why drug dealers love to use their BlackBerry apps, because they couldn't decipher. And it was so popular. The only thing that they needed to do is port BlackBerry Messenger into the iPhone. If they would have done that soon enough, they would still be a multi-billion dollar company today. Just with that.
Yeah, I agree. And so much of the innovation there, because what the BlackBerry did so well is it made it possible to have a good user experience with very low bandwidth networks. Today you've got 5G on your phone. It's not that hard, but BlackBerry did very, very well to manage messaging and handoff with really very basic data connectivity over wireless. That was 1G technology.
Incredible, right? I think we're blessed, Mahi, because I look at my grandkids. I got 2 grandkids. They were born with cell phones and tablets, and like wireless was the default for them. Like, so as kids are born in these later years, they don't realize where we came from. Like, they don't know what's a dial-up modem at 2400 baud rate.
That's right.
Right? Tell me what kept you going? I mean, like, after your success in early startups, after your success in technology in Silicon Valley, what's your motivation for keep going and not just saying, okay, I'm done blessing the world with my wisdom. I'm going to go sip margaritas in front of a beach. What's that?
David, I think it goes back to being an immigrant child and learning that life is never going to get handed to you, that you have to work for it. And my parents were college professors. They worked very hard, and what they were able to do was infect other people with their ideas and education, and make sure that they were able to go out and do great things, their students. And I think as a technologist, at least from my perspective, the power of building something that you could put in the hands of millions, if not hundreds of millions, billions of people, that can change their life even a little bit, has incredible transformative power. It has the ability to turn people that are very disadvantaged, underprivileged, and make it a little bit more of a level playing field. Technology and content has done that, right? What you see with, whether you see it on a short form video app like Triller, or on YouTube or TikTok, it really has changed the way that people consume content, but also it's changed the way that people can make a living. I also really, what gets me out of bed in the morning are doing new things. I started, like I said, being very hardware focused, shifted to software. When I worked at Apple, I worked a lot on graphics and image processing technologies, 2D, 3D. And then when I went to VeriSign, I worked on security. I couldn't spell security, but understanding, how encryption works. And then I got into social media, mobile, of course. And now we're in using AI, natural language processing. So more than anything, it's being able to do something new and to learn those things and hopefully be reasonably good at it, so that you can harness that into building a product or service that like I said, hopefully gets used by lots and lots of people.
It's beautiful. The thing, what I see, I love this podcast because I get blessed with the people that I interview like you. And I see a pattern, right? And the pattern of the people that get into my podcast, their hearts are in the right place. And that's why they keep going, right? And you are a classic example of that. But on top of that, that need for creativity and release your creativity in a way that will impact the world in a positive way. It's beautiful, right? I was talking with somebody else the other day, and I was telling him, like, if I ask myself that question, it's like, why do I keep going? Well, number one, I know how to run self-managed businesses, so I don't necessarily need to be in the details of the business. I just create, and then I get other people to run it. And if I have the God-given ability to create employment and push society forward, why wouldn't I? Because at some point, it's not about the money anymore. Once you have certain level of financial stability, you don't care. You don't care about yourself because you're set. But you do care about the other people. You do care about the creativity. You do care about adding value to life. I truly believe that if you stop adding value to the world will just discard you, right? It is actually, I saw statistics, males that retire 55 years old or a little bit older, within 5 years they are dead. Because they lose their their purpose in life. And it's crazy. I am a man of faith. I'm a follower of Jesus Christ, and I see my ventures, I see this podcast in a way of blessing people to achieve that financial success that you and I have, so that they can keep going in a way that they can actually bless other people. And if they are not into entrepreneurship, they shouldn't be watching this podcast because it's a business podcast, right? And that another thing that I want to talk about, Mahi, is you are an immigrant child. I was an immigrant too. We come from countries that are very poor. And if you go back to those countries, at least in my case, in Guatemala, I've seen how the company prospered because of technology, because of people that brought technology there. For example, landlines. It will take 2-3 years to buy a landline in Guatemala in the 80s. You went back in, like in the year 2000, and there were no more landlines. They went right into cellular. And cellular is like ocean-to-ocean coverage. Like, they have better cellular systems than we have here. But it's because it's a tiny country, and it was too expensive to do the old technology. So they went right into the new technology. And now you go there and you see all these high-rise buildings with people supporting tech companies in North America. So it's like, I can see how this is blessing the world, not only North America, but it's the free market and it's entrepreneurship. It's what you and I came to this continent to do, right? We came to build businesses and to promote prosperity through innovative ideas and have the right to compete in a free market, right?
Absolutely. David, just like your experience, I was born in Sri Lanka. It's a tiny little island in the Indian Ocean. And, in the generation that I would have been growing up, like, opportunities for women in that country were very limited. Even though people are generally pretty well educated, professional, opportunities were quite limited. Where you have this broad swath of young women working like in the garment industry. If you look at that country today, that country produces almost 50% of their graduates in computer science are women. Wow. Right? That would have been very different 20, 30, 40 years ago. And these women are knowledge workers. They have real skill. They are marketable. They could, many of them find, if they want to, they can go out of the country and be employed all over the world. So the not just broadly disseminating technology, but seeing big cultural shifts like that really empower the underprivileged, the underserved. I think that's technology's biggest contribution. And I think we're still just at the tip of the iceberg.
Yeah. And it's beautiful because most of the time I just rant about this bad side effect of technology, like the addiction to dopamine with mobile app development, the addiction to social media, the lack of real face-to-face social events that COVID made it even worse, but technology contributed to that. So there is always a good face and a bad face to everything. In technology, I believe it's our responsibility to teach our children how to use technology responsibly. But it's not necessarily the technology's fault. It's how we actually consume it. Now, we know that there is built-in game theory in apps. There is we know how to produce dopamine in people's brains when they're using our apps. So, we're guilty as charged. But at the same time, I'm not going to stop developing tech just because somebody could get addicted to it. It's like, people get addicted to food. And if you don't eat, you die. But people are addicted to sweets, for example, right? So I love the fact that this podcast went into the way that it's shining the light on technology for what it's doing, because it's a global phenomenon that is making this world a better place for sure. Right?
For sure. Yeah. I think as much as you mentioned, there's that downside risk of making, unlimited amounts of content that people will just sit there for hours and consume. I think it's unfortunate that, we don't teach our children that there has to be more of a balance in how they interact with devices and content and their online experiences. But for those children that do strike a better balance, they're so much better equipped. They learn faster. They do build more personal relationships with people that are important to them. And I see this with my children. I call it real-time evolution. I can see from just one generation how we are evolving faster as human beings, but being able to leverage technology, not to be a slave to technology.
It's beautiful. I could be talking to you for a week, I think, and I want to respect your time, and you're a very busy professional. So I will ask you one last question before we finish the podcast. And I think we're at the right place at the right time for this question. If you had access to a billboard in front of the busiest highway on earth, what would you write in it?
So, I would say that there's kind of two parts of my brain that wants to react to that. One is, if you want to say something that makes a difference, I think, and this, David, you talked about being a man of faith. I was raised a Buddhist. And so what I would want on that billboard is to say, kindness matters. When you think about our daily lives and the decisions we have to make, if we can be just a little bit more kind to one another, we'll make this world a better place.
It's funny that you talk about that and kindness. In the Bible, when the disciples asked Jesus, what are the two most important commandments out of the whole thing? He said, there's only two things that you need to do, and that, if you do those two things, the entire scripture is covered from cover to cover. And he said, love your God with all your might and all your will, and love your neighbor as you love yourself, which talks about kindness, right? So do unto others as you would like them to do unto you. That's the whole thing about kindness, and that's it. Like the entire, my entire scripture is covered by those two things. If you don't do those two things, you're set for life, and you will eliminate so much suffering. If we all had kindness in the way that you and I are talking about, this will be a much different world, wouldn't it?
Yes, and hopefully we can use technology to help people be more kind.
Oh, we're doing it already. This podcast is about that.
That's great.
Maggie, thank you so much for your time. Tell me if people like to get in touch with you or learn more about you. I know that we cannot talk about the current venture you're in, but once we go public, I'll get you back into the podcast, and then we'll research that. Where can they find you?
Yeah, you can find me on LinkedIn. I'm just Mahi Silva. It's an unusual enough name. It'd be easy to find me. Or that's probably the best way to connect.
LinkedIn. Yeah, that's where I am too. Mahi, thank you so much for your time. Please keep going on your ventures. Because of people like you, is that we are enjoying the freedom that we have in the modern world. So thank you. God bless, and have a beautiful holiday season. And I'll see you around.
Okay, thank you, David. We'll talk soon.
Blessings. Cheers.
Bye.
Thank you for tuning in to the Leaders in Tech podcast. Check in next week to keep learning how to use technology and leadership to change the game. See you next time.